Welcome to the WCSU first comprehensive LinkedIn workshop featuring post-road consulting. So without further ado, I want to introduce Sandra Long.
Great. Well, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. And I love the space, and I'm so happy to see all your faces here. And I'm so pleased that we have a combination of students from WestCon, we have employees, and we have alumni. So I'm just thrilled that you're all here. So we're happy to be here. This is our plan for the morning. We have a lot to do. We're going to start off by talking about personal branding, and then we're going to focus on a hands-on session. So hopefully you've all mostly logged in. If you don't have a computer, don't worry. We will have access to the computer room next door. But it's a good idea to be logged in so that we can, because we are on a fast track. And then we're going to be going through each part of the profile, piece step by step. We'll be introducing each section, and then our team will be walking around and making sure, and we'll show you hands-on how to do it, and making sure you're doing it and you're getting the most out of it. And then we're going to come back and focus. The last half an hour is on job search, and using this for career. But one thing that Kathleen said that I want to kind of emphasize, which I thought was perfect, which is that your personal brand, yes, you're thinking about it now, maybe if you're about to graduate or if you're in a job search, but it's not even just that. It's as you're in the professional workforce, you will need to be considering your personal brand. So it's for all of us, whether you end up being an entrepreneur, whether you end up being an employee at a company, it's something that for all of us is going to be significant, right? So this is my quote: personal branding is actively managing your image and defining your unique value. So if you can either decide to manage it, or other people will have their impressions of you, right? That's pretty much how it goes. So a little bit of a story, because I like to start with a story. And back in the 60s and 70s, this was my family moving around. To see the moving truck? And so I was always the new girl. Did anybody else move around when they were? You did, okay. Anyone else? All right. So, well, you and I can relate, right? So when you're the new girl, that means you have to learn to make friends, and you have to find classmates that will be with you because you're young and you want to have those friends. And you also learn that you're creating impressions, and people get impressions of you immediately, as soon as they meet you. So when I moved from Boston up to Rochester, New York, I remember they made fun of my accent. So at that time I had a very strong accent, right? And I moved to Pennsylvania, and they made fun of what I wore. So I learned quickly, changing my socks, right? So it's really an amazing thing. So, but nowadays our impressions, and when you think about impressions, and when I grew up and when my children grew up, we learned about handshakes, eye contact, smiling, right? Having a good impression, wearing nice clothes, that makes a good impression. But nowadays, it's much more online. The impression that someone's going to have of you is oftentimes online before they meet you, right? Do you agree with that? Yeah? All right. So it started, this idea of personal branding. Branding used to be for companies and for products. And in 1997, Tom Peters wrote this article in Fast Company magazine, and it's a great article. It's a long article. If you're really interested in the topic of personal branding, you might want to read it. Even though it's almost 30 years old, it's completely relevant to how you manage managing the perception that people have of you. It's a fantastic article. So what happened in 2003? So we talked about 97. What happened in 2003? Yes. So in 2003 was a startup out in Mountain View, California called LinkedIn. Right? That was when they started. So here's the news flash. They started before Facebook. And it was really just a career site. And now what's happened? Especially in the last few years, wow. And it's more than a career site. I mean, it is definitely a career site, mainly because recruiters are on here looking for talent. That's kind of where the beginning started. But now you've got all kinds of business people on here. So if anyone, professionals are on here. If you think about the folks that are on LinkedIn, it's the highest income, highest educated people among all social media users. So it's the people that will hire you. It's the people that you'll do business with that are on LinkedIn. And especially in the last few years, and there's a big push for students and new grads to be on LinkedIn. There's a lot of new features that LinkedIn has specifically for you. All right, so between 2012 and 2014, there have been a lot of profile changes. So is anyone here a longtime user of LinkedIn? Okay, good, good. So even for longtime users, there have been some changes, so we'll make sure that you have all of that, okay? And the big issue now is that the profile views. That's the most popular feature on LinkedIn is the profile view. So people are looking at profiles. How many people are looking at anyone here looking at other people's profiles? Okay, do you think they're looking at you? Yes, they are. Yes, they are. All right, so now it's become the first impression. It's before the interview, it's before the sales call, right? It is the first impression. It's the first impression, and it's also, if they're interested in you, after they've met you, they're also going to validate about you by looking at your LinkedIn profile as well. So it's the first impression and it's the last impression. So your personal brand, what does that really mean? We talked about it a little bit. It's what makes you unique. And many people think it's like a resume, like I worked here, I went to this school, that's what it is. Well, is that enough? Right, I don't think so. There's so much more to your personal brand, and when someone hires you, there's so many more elements they're going to think about, or if they're going to collaborate with you and partner with you, there's so many more elements they're going to think about that makes you special and makes you unique, the type of person that they want to work with, right? So, and it's kind of a combination of professional and personal. I would have to say years ago, people thought of LinkedIn as really just taking your resume and putting it on LinkedIn, and it was just professional. But don't we hire people that we like? Don't we hire people that we trust, that we kind of know or that we were referred to? Isn't that kind of how the world works? So that means the person that you are is also reflected in his social media. So it's not just the professional. It's all professional, but it's also a little bit of personal. Not Facebook, not personal to that regard, but personal in terms of who you are as a professional. So I'm going to ask, actually, Craig and Heather, we lose Heather, come on up. So how many people read Dr. Seuss? Who read, oh yes! Do we all love Dr. Seuss? So I discovered something that Dr. Seuss had Dr. Seuss was amazing. In fact, his birthday was March 2nd. And if you really look at what he wrote, and if you read either for yourself or for your kids or your nephews and nieces, he wrote a lot about personal branding and motivation. So I have Heather and Craig are going to read 2 of his quotes for you.
You're on your own, and you know what you know, and you are the one who will decide where to go.
Today you are you, that is truer than true. There is no one alive who is youer than you.
Okay. So I especially love the youer than you. Thank you guys for doing that.
Sure.
I told them this morning, you have to read something really corny. And they were very good about it. But it's true though, I mean, it's the essence. If I was talking to a room of people, and I do this oftentimes, I'll go to an industry association, I might talk to all finance people, or it could be all marketing people, right? And I'll say to them, you don't want to all look the same. You all have the same certifications, you went to the same school, you took the same courses. No, bring out your uniqueness. That's what Dr. Seuss was talking about, bringing out what is it about you that somebody really wants to work with. And that's really the key of personal branding. So we start with being found. So in order to have them to even look at your profile, they have to find your profile. And as we go through the hands-on, you'll be creating a profile that's 100% complete. And one of the things that LinkedIn does is they require certain minimum requirements in order to be what's called 100% complete. And if you are over that threshold, you are more likely to be found. So if someone comes and puts your name into LinkedIn, you want them to come to you, right? You don't want any delay. So 96% of recruiters are searching on LinkedIn. Were you all aware of this? Everybody's aware of this? A little bit? Okay, so what does that mean? That means companies, they don't just have the same platform you do. Companies will hire, they actually pay thousands of dollars per year, per recruiter, to have a special platform that they add onto LinkedIn so that they can find talent. They pay a lot of money for this. And what they do is when they're searching for people to work for their companies, they'll put in years of experience. They'll put in a geography, like say they want someone in the Connecticut area or New York or whatever the geography, and they'll put in keywords. So if they're looking for a marketing person, they'll put in those types of words, or accounting, or whatever it might be, right? So we're going to talk about that and make sure you're set up so that at least you can be found, either by recruiters or by hiring managers, right? Because they're also going into LinkedIn and doing those types of searches. So the words make a difference. The words you use, just like when you meet someone, the language that you use, the words you use, make an impact on them. It's the same online, right? So there's things like called keywords, and I'll show you an example of that in a few minutes. There's keywords, but also the language you use. You want to think about, what industry am I interested in, and what is that language, and how, does it make sense for me to start incorporating that language, especially if you had some experience, maybe at an internship, right? So that's something to be thinking about, the words. And there are different people that teach this in a different way. So I'm a big believer in the words are important, but I'm also a believer that when they arrive at your profile, you want them to like you and say, I'm impressed and I'm interested and I'm intrigued and I'm compelled to call that person, or I'm interested in finding out more about you. And the way you do that is making it, I call it customer friendly or employer friendly, right? So when they get to your page, they're really interested in you and they feel that you're a good match, right? So that's all part of what we're going to be doing today. Now, one of the things that happened between 2012 and 2014 is there are a lot of new opportunities to add images and rich media. So that means photos, videos, all of that now can be on your LinkedIn profile. And that's really fantastic. If you think about your background, if you've been involved in something where you've been on YouTube for some reason, maybe a place where you were interning or one of your classes, or if you've done some slide shares, or if you've had some photos taken of you doing a project, those are great things to add onto your LinkedIn profile. Again, they're personal and they're professional. They're showing you in action. They're demonstrating, not just telling. So that's really something. So adding a headshot. This is huge. This might surprise you, but you're 14 times more likely to be viewed with a headshot. Why is that? If I'm looking for you online and you don't have a picture, I'm not going to take you as seriously. And there are some people that will not connect with you, and there are other group managers that will not accept you in the LinkedIn group if you don't have a photo. I have great news for you, right? Kathleen's you've got photos upstairs? From 9 to 11, right. So as we're going through the hands-on section, if you don't have a photo, make sure you get yourself up there at some point so that you want to have a photo,
We
right?
have a professional photographer up there who will actually hand you a photo of people up there. Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now they're going to need a digital version. So how lucky is it that, first of all, I want to thank you all for coming, but how lucky is it that you also have a photographer to take your picture? You will be very happy to have that. And your prospective employers and networking people will be more likely to look at you and want to network with you. So 14 times, this is huge. There's also an opportunity for a background banner. So this is something that happened in 2014. LinkedIn, so those of you that have been on LinkedIn for a while, you now have an opportunity to put a banner in the back. And you want to think again about your brand. So depending on what you do, you can put something related to your field, your profession, right? If you're a college, if you're a professor, you might have a campus picture in the background, right? That would be very suitable, right? Some people use a word cloud, or they'll have a picture of them, of something about their industry. I work with bankers and they have actual pictures of money. I mean, so something that's professional, that's related to your field. In this case, this is a gentleman who's in the alarm business, and he's got a montage of all his clients. So he's got different, he's got residential, commercial. So there's lots of opportunity for a background banner. And your headline, so that's my headline. I do have a photo here, but your headline is something we will be talking about and making it particularly for students and new grads that are looking for a new career. Your headline can be very descriptive and help you be noticed by someone who is going to be connecting with you and realize that you'd be someone that they would want to connect with as well, right? So and it can also help you be found. So experience is probably the meaty part, one of the most meaty parts of your profile that we'll be talking about. And what we'll be, when we do the hands-on, we'll be making sure that I'll show you exactly how to do this. But the experience section, if you don't have that filled out with 3 positions, you're missing out. You get 12 times more views. So for those of you that are younger, in college age, and maybe you only have 1 internship in there, try to come back with your previous positions, right? So maybe it's an older internship, an older job, a summer job, a part-time job, whatever. You want to have 3 positions, if possible, to get you at 100% complete, okay? But for all of us. So skills. Now this is an area that a lot of people are confused or concerned, or they're questioning about, because they changed a lot of the things about skills and endorsements about 2 or 3 years ago. This is actually an increasingly important part of your profile. And the skills are something that people definitely search by, and they're adding more features related to the skills. So it's becoming more important, although I have to say there's a lot of confusion. We will teach you in the hands-on section how to prioritize. We can move them around, we can remove those that are not appropriate, and we can add new ones in. So you're going to be in charge and control of your skills, and that's really important. And you're going to get 13 times more views with skills. So I've seen people that have shut those off, and they're really losing out. Now I will say, in certain industries, they have to shut off the endorsements. So for example, if you're wealth management, like you work at Merrill Lynch, something like that, or UBS, and you're dealing in the wealth management business, then there's certain regulations where you shut off the endorsements. You can still keep the skills. But I don't know that there's anyone in that situation here. Otherwise, we want to get endorsements. Learning. This is perfect for a university audience. Learning. It's changed so much. Employers today want to hire people that are good learners. Do you agree with that, Kathleen? Absolutely. It's not just that you have this wonderful degree. They want to hire people that are there to learn and keep learning. Why? Because everything is changing. Everything is changing all the time. So you're really learning to learn. So one of the things they're looking for in your profile is what kind of a learner is this person, right? So how do you show that? So there's education, which we'll make sure today that your education is there, that you have the logo for WestCon. We'll make sure you have the logo. If you went to another school earlier, we'll make sure that's on there. You can add your courses as well, and if you have certain certifications. You can also write about yourself in your summary and talk about learning, because learning is just a massively important thing for all employers. In fact, I'd say that it's got to be right up there at the top. They want to take people in that are ready to learn. So, vision and goals. Now wait a minute, this is a LinkedIn. Remember I said it's not just the same as your profile, it's more than that. So if you are working on something or have something that's really important to you and your brand, it's totally fine to bring that out, that's something that you're working toward, that's really important to you. And that your future employer would be happy to know that, they'd like to know that kind of thing. Oftentimes, you have a story, and the stories are what really compels people to remember you. You all have your own story. Maybe your story is that you work a lot of hours and you go to college. That's an impressive story. An employer who hears that would be impressed, and that's a really great story. Or maybe you have a story where you started doing one thing and you came and changed to do something else, and there's a reason behind it, something that you learned. That's a story. You heard my story. My story in my business, I talk about the fact that I was the new girl, and I had to figure out how to make friends. And to me, that's what we're talking about now. It's as simple as networking and starting with your career. It's as simple as making friends and creating a good impression, just like I did in the 60s and 70s. That's what we're all doing. It's not hard. The more relationships and the more you're able to express your brand, the more opportunities you'll have in your career. It's really that simple. So what is your story? Attitude and presence. How do you like this guy, right? You can tell attitude and presence. So one of my clients is an interior designer down in Greenwich. And in her summary, her name is Lynn Garlick, and she talks about how much passion she has for working with her clients, right? And you really get, and her gratitude. So I don't like the kind of profile that, I don't look at profiles where you come up and you just start bragging. It's not, you want to make this a very subtle thing. You could be as wonderful as anyone in the world, but you want to make sure it comes off that you're learning and appreciative, and you really, it's a subtle thing, but the way, the words you use, we're going to help you today. We want to use words that you're coming off in such a nice way that people are so compelled, right? So Lynn, who's a very amazing interior designer, she talks about her gratitude for what she does in her business, and it really comes off nicely. That's just an example of how an attitude. So if I read an interior designer that just says I'm the greatest this and I'm the greatest that, and I read Lynn's, I get a different feel of that person, right? So reputation and trust and social proof. Well, these are things that come across from, recommendations, endorsements, right? All that kind of thing. Who's in your network? All that comes across. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that in the latter part. Leadership. Wow, leadership. I can look at a LinkedIn profile and I can make assumptions about what kind of a leader the person is, right? How can I do that? Well, first of all, are they a thought leader? So a thought leader is someone who is sharing good information about the industry perhaps. Maybe they're sharing content, right? Maybe they're publishing, there's a blogging feature on LinkedIn. So that's something that maybe, does anybody here write or blog? 1, 2, 3, 4, okay. So if you're writing or blogging elsewhere, you can consider doing that on LinkedIn, and that really does show your thought leadership. There's different options. You can share content, or you can produce content on the publishing platform, right? So it's something that you can really show your thought leadership. The other way I look at leadership is recommendations. Now this might surprise you, but it's not just the recommendations you get, but it's the recommendations you give. So if I'm working with I work with a lot of corporations, and if I'm working with leaders, I'll tell them, if I've looked at a profile where they haven't been giving recommendations, I'm not that impressed with them as a leader. If they're a leader, they've hired teams, they've managed people, they've done all these projects, they've collaborated, they should be recommended, right? So leadership, you can learn a lot, and what are they saying when they write those recommendations? So leadership is pretty amazing in terms of your personal brand. So if you're leading a project on campus, think about yourself as a leader. Could you write a recommendation for a fellow student and talk about how they participated or whatever? That shows your leadership, right? And your generosity as a networker, and it reflects well of you. Personality and values and passion. So your personality comes out, and values and your passion, and all of that can be part of something when we get into the summary. And again, you do that in such a way that's very professional, but it relates well to when someone's looking at you to hire you, to understand you. That's what they want to know more about you. In fact, a lot of these companies, they see you've got the qualifications, you've got the skills, and you've got the the education, right? But do you fit in with the company? That's what they're looking for. That's why you hear companies are going and looking on social media and they're looking at they want to know, what are you about? Even if it's not on your resume, they want to understand what kind of values and what kind of person you are, to make sure you fit. Because if you fit, you're going to stay. It's expensive if you come in and then 6 months later you leave. They've trained you, you're gone. They want to see that you're a good fit. Does that make sense? Right. All right, so engagement and sharing, there's a whole etiquette. Just like you have etiquette when you walk into a meeting, you come here or you go to your class, there's etiquette about that. You show up on time, you're helpful in your class, all that stuff. Same thing online. There's etiquette online. So if you're not familiar with that, that's something that is really important, is being positive always, right? And that's and not sharing personal details, but it's all about it's professional and being helpful. All of that's part of the etiquette online. And then interests. Now, there's an interest section, and I love the interest section, and it can relate to you professionally. So Lynn, who's an interior designer, is telling you about her. She's also in the Historical Society, the Art Society, she does the garden stuff. So when you think about her as an interior designer, her interests kind of go along with that, it makes sense, right? So she shows that in interest, she shows that in her organizations and her volunteering. It all kind of combines. So what are you doing outside of, what you're doing in terms of classroom and work? Are there any interests you have or things that you're doing that organizationally or volunteer-wise that connect in with what you're looking to do? You probably have some of the same examples. Networking community, we talked about that. So when you think about all these elements, it's not just where you work and where you go to school and where you graduated. There's a unique value. That's what we're trying to get to in terms of personal branding, right? So it's all about it's thinking about putting your best foot forward online that you possibly can. So that you can, this is it's pre-selling. Before they meet you, and in fact, before they meet you, you want them to feel excited to meet you. Maybe they've even been referred to you. Maybe you have an interview set up or you've got a meeting set up. You want to be in the position where they are looking at your profile and they've got questions for you. They're as interested, and you're looking at their profile and you have questions for them. So when you get together, it's a great conversation. It's accelerated, and it's personal.